In the heart of New York City, there was a little jazz club that most people wouldn't notice unless they were looking for it. It wasn't fancy or flashy, just a cozy place with dim yellow lights, worn wooden floors, and walls covered in old black and white photos of musicians from decades past. Every night, locals and tourists alike would gather here to sip on cocktails, share stories, and listen to live music. But what really kept this place running smoothly was the staff, especially one man who blended into the background so well that no one ever gave him a second thought. This man worked as a waiter at the club. He wasn't particularly tall or striking. He had messy brown hair that always seemed like it needed a comb, warm brown eyes that rarely met anyone's gaze directly, and a quiet way of moving around the room. His name tag said Alex, but most customers didn't even bother reading it. To them, he was just another face serving drinks and clearing tables. No one knew much about him, and honestly, no one cared to ask. But if you'd paid closer attention, you might have noticed something different about Alex. There was a certain calmness about him, a kind of stillness that made him stand out, even though he tried hard not to draw attention to himself. When he spoke, his voice was soft but steady, almost like he was choosing every word carefully before saying it. And when he smiled, which wasn't often, it felt genuine, like he meant it. What no one realized was that beneath that quiet exterior, Alex carried a secret. Years ago, he hadn't been a waiter at all. In fact, he'd once been known for something completely different, something extraordinary. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, and after a series of painful events, Alex had walked away from the world that once celebrated him. Now, he preferred staying behind the scenes, content to let others take center stage while he quietly went about his work. Every evening, Alex arrived at the club just as the sun began to set. He'd tie on his apron, grab his notepad, and start taking orders without a word of complaint. The regulars liked him because he was efficient and polite, never interrupting conversations or hovering too long at their tables. If someone asked for recommendations, he'd offer suggestions with a nod and a small smile, then disappear again, leaving them to enjoy their meal. One thing about Alex, though, was how he moved through the space. He didn't rush or stumble. Instead, he glided between tables, balancing trays loaded with drinks and plates as if they weighed nothing at all. Some nights, when the crowd thinned out and the band took a break, Alex would pause by the piano in the corner. He'd glance at it briefly, his fingers twitching slightly as if itching to touch the keys. Then, shaking his head almost imperceptibly, he'd turn away and go back to work. No one thought twice about these moments. After all, plenty of people looked at instruments and imagined playing them, right? It didn't mean anything special. Or so everyone assumed. Then came the night that changed everything. It started off like any other evening. The club was buzzing with its usual mix of chatter and laughter. Couples leaned close over candlelit tables, friends raised glasses in celebration, and the band played mellow tunes that floated through the air like smoke. Everything seemed normal until the manager rushed out from the back office, looking flustered. "The pianist isn't coming," he announced to the staff. He called in sick. There was a collective groan. Without live music, the atmosphere wouldn't be the same. Patrons expected entertainment, and an empty stage would disappoint them. Someone suggested putting on recorded tracks, but the manager shook his head. "That wouldn't cut it, not tonight. We need someone to fill in," the manager said, scanning the room. "Anyone know how to play?" Silence followed. Most of the staff shrugged or shook their heads. Playing piano in front of a crowd wasn't exactly part of their job description. Just as the manager was about to give up, Alex stepped forward. "I can do it," he said simply. The words hung in the air for a moment. Everyone turned to look at him, surprised. Sure, Alex was dependable, but a pianist? Really? You sure? The manager asked, raising an eyebrow. Alex nodded. "Yeah, I'm sure." Without waiting for further questions, he untied his apron, hung it on a hook, and walked toward the piano. A few patrons glanced up curiously, but most didn't pay much attention. They figured he was probably rearranging chairs or checking the equipment. After all, why would a waiter suddenly decide to perform? As Alex settled onto the bench, adjusting his posture and cracking his knuckles, the room grew quieter. People began to realize something unusual was happening. Curious eyes drifted toward the stage, and murmurs rippled through the crowd, and then Alex placed his hands on the keys and the first note rang out. It wasn't loud or flashy, but it stopped everyone in their tracks. Conversations faltered, forks paused midway to mouths, and heads swiveled toward the source of the sound. What followed was unlike anything anyone had heard before. Each note flowed effortlessly into the next, building layers of emotion that filled the room. By the time Alex finished the first piece, the entire audience was spellbound. No one could believe what they were witnessing. This wasn't just some random guy filling in for the night, this was pure magic. When the final chord faded, silence lingered for a heartbeat before erupting into thunderous applause. People stood, clapping wildly, shouting for more. But Alex slipped away before anyone could stop him, vanishing into the shadows as quickly as he'd appeared. That night, whispers spread throughout the club. Who was this mysterious waiter who could play like a master? How had such talent gone unnoticed for so long? Questions swirled, but answers remained elusive. All anyone knew for certain was that something incredible had happened, and it was only the beginning. The room was electric. The moment Alex's fingers touched the piano keys, something shifted in the air. It wasn't just the music, it was the way it felt alive, like every note carried a piece of his soul. People who had been chatting casually over their drinks suddenly froze mid-sentence. Forks stopped halfway to mouths, and even the bartender paused wiping glasses to listen. At first, it was hard to believe what they were hearing. This was the same guy who served them drinks and cleared empty plates without saying much. He blended into the background so perfectly that no one gave him a second thought. But now, here he was, sitting at the piano like he owned it, playing with a skill that seemed almost otherworldly. His hands moved across the keys with a fluid grace as if they'd been born for this very purpose. Every chord, every melody was precise yet deeply emotional, pulling at something inside everyone who listened. The first song he played was soft and gentle, a soothing tune that wrapped around the room like a warm blanket. Some people closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others leaned forward, staring at the stage in disbelief, trying to process what they were witnessing. It wasn't flashy or showy, there were no dramatic flourishes or loud crescendos, but it didn't need to be. The simplicity of it made it all the more powerful. By the time the last note faded away, there was a brief silence, as if the audience needed a moment to catch their breath. Then came the applause. At first, it was hesitant, scattered claps from a few tables. But within seconds it grew louder, more confident, until the entire room erupted into cheers. Strangers exchanged wide-eyed glances, shaking their heads in amazement. "Did you see that?" one man whispered to his date. "That was unbelievable." Alex barely reacted. He sat quietly at the piano, his head bowed slightly, as if he hadn't noticed the reaction he'd sparked. When the noise finally died down, he began another piece. This time, something livelier, with a playful rhythm that made toes tap and heads nod along. The energy in the room shifted again, becoming lighter, brighter. A group of friends near the front started laughing, their earlier worries about work or bills forgotten for the moment. Even the grumpiest-looking patron at the bar cracked a smile. As the night went on, Alex played song after song, each one different from the last. He mixed classical pieces with jazz standards, adding his own twists and improvisations that left listeners marveling at his creativity. There was a depth to his playing, a raw honesty that resonated with everyone, regardless of age or background. One older woman dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, while a young couple held hands tightly, swaying gently to the music. It was as if Alex had tapped into something universal, a shared human experience that transcended words. By the end of the set, the applause was deafening. People stood up, whistling and cheering, demanding an encore. But instead of staying to soak up the adoration, Alex slipped off the bench and disappeared into the crowd before anyone could approach him. The manager rushed over, looking both thrilled and confused. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked, but Alex only shrugged. "I used to play a lot," he said quietly. "It's been a while, though." That answer didn't satisfy anyone, As word spread about the mysterious waiter pianist, curiosity reached fever pitch. Regulars who had seen him perform couldn't stop talking about it, recounting every detail to friends and family. Newcomers flocked to the club the next evening, eager to hear the story firsthand. Some even brought cameras, hoping to capture the magic on video. The place was packed, far busier than usual, and the staff scrambled to keep up with the sudden influx of customers. When Alex walked in that night, tying on his apron like always, the atmosphere was tense with anticipation. Everyone wanted to know if he'd play again. Would he step up to the piano once more, or retreat back into the shadows? The manager approached him nervously, pleading for another performance. "Please, we need you tonight," he said. "People are here because of you." For a moment, Alex hesitated. You could see the conflict in his eyes. He didn't want the attention, but he also couldn't deny the impact his music had on others. Finally, he nodded. "Okay," he said softly. "But I'm not doing interviews or anything like that." "True." To his word, Alex returned to the piano later that evening, delivering another unforgettable set. This time, however, he added a personal touch. Between songs, he spoke briefly, sharing snippets of stories behind the music. He talked about how certain pieces reminded him of places he'd been or moments he'd lived through. His voice was calm and measured, but there was a vulnerability in his words that drew people in even further. One story, in particular, stuck with the audience. He explained how a melancholic melody he played had been inspired by long nights spent staring out a rainy window, thinking about lost opportunities and paths not taken. "Sometimes music helps me make sense of things I can't put into words," he admitted. "Maybe it does the same for you." Those words struck a chord with many in the room. People nodded silently, some tearing up as they realized how deeply they connected with what he was saying. For a brief moment, the barriers between strangers fell away, replaced by a shared understanding. Music, it seemed, had a way of uniting them in ways nothing else could. As the weeks passed, Alex became the heart of the club. Every night, he alternated between waiting tables and performing, refusing to abandon either role entirely. During the day, he remained the same quiet, unassuming figure who greeted customers with a polite smile. But at night, when he sat down at the piano, he transformed into someone else entirely, a musician whose talent and passion left audiences breathless. Despite his growing fame, Alex stayed humble. He avoided the spotlight whenever possible, declining offers from journalists and photographers who wanted to interview him. "I'm not here for the attention," he told the manager firmly. "I'm here because this is where I belong for now." His refusal to seek recognition only added to his mystique. Rumors began to swirl about his past. Some speculated that he'd once been a professional musician who'd fallen on hard times. Others wondered if he'd trained under a famous teacher or performed in prestigious venues. No one knew for sure, and Alex wasn't offering any clues. What was clear, though, was the effect he had on those around him. The club, which had struggled to stay afloat before Alex's arrival, now thrived. Regular patrons kept coming back, bringing friends and family with them. Tourists sought it out, eager to experience the legendary performances they'd heard about online. Even the staff noticed a change. They worked harder, laughed more, and took pride in being part of something special. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Alex was the way he touched individual lives. After shows, people would linger, reluctant to leave. Some approached him shyly, thanking him for the music and sharing how it had moved them. A middle-aged man once confessed that Alex's rendition of a familiar tune had reminded him of his late mother, bringing tears to his eyes but also comfort. A college student admitted she'd been having a tough week, but listening to him play had lifted her spirits in a way nothing else could. Alex listened to these stories with genuine interest, nodding and smiling softly. He never dismissed anyone's feelings or brushed off their gratitude. Instead, he seemed to absorb it all, letting it fuel his music even more. Each performance felt like a gift, not just to the audience, but to himself as well. And so, the little jazz club continued to thrive, its reputation growing with each passing night. What had started as a chance encounter, a waiter stepping in, for a missing pianist had blossomed into something extraordinary. Alex may have tried to stay in the background, but his talent refused to be ignored. Through his music, he had found a way to connect with people on a level few ever achieve. The question on everyone's mind, however, was whether this was just the beginning or if Alex would eventually disappear back into the shadows, leaving behind only memories and unanswered questions. As word of Alex's incredible performances spread, the little jazz club became more than just a cozy spot for music lovers. It turned into a place where stories were shared, lives intersected, and emotions ran deep. Every night people poured in from all over the city, eager to witness what had become a kind of urban legend, the waiter who played piano like an angel. The room buzzed with anticipation as patrons waited for him to step onto the stage, their conversations blending into a low hum that filled the space until the first notes rang out. But despite the growing attention, Alex remained as enigmatic as ever. He didn't seek the spotlight, nor did he encourage the constant speculation about his past. To most, he was still the same quiet man who served drinks during the day and disappeared after his sets without fanfare. Yet the mystery surrounding him only added fuel to the fire. People couldn't help but wonder, who was this man? Where had he learned to play like that? And why was he working as a waiter instead of pursuing a career in music? It wasn't long before curiosity got the better of someone. A journalist, sharp-eyed and persistent, started frequenting the club, sitting at the bar with a notebook tucked under her arm. She watched Alex closely, jotting down observations whenever she could. At first, he didn't notice her. He was too focused on his routine, balancing his dual roles as waiter and musician. But one evening, after a particularly moving performance, she approached him cautiously. "Excuse me," she said, catching him as he stepped away from the piano. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I have to ask, how did you learn to play like that?" Alex froze for a moment, clearly uncomfortable with the question. He glanced around the room, then back at her, his expression guarded. "It's just something I've always done," he replied vaguely, trying to end the conversation there. The journalist wasn't deterred. Over the next few weeks, she returned again and again, piecing together bits of information from staff members and regulars. She noticed the way Alex sometimes paused by the piano when no one was looking, his fingers hovering above the keys as if longing to play. She saw how he carried himself not arrogantly, but with a quiet confidence that hinted at years of practice. And she heard the whispers among the staff about his refusal to talk about his past. Finally, after weeks of digging, she uncovered a clue that sent chills down her spine. While researching old recordings online, she stumbled across a grainy video of a young pianist performing at a prestigious conservatory recital. The resemblance between the boy in the video and the man playing at the club was uncanny. Both had the same intense focus, the same delicate touch on the keys. Intrigued, she dug deeper and discovered that the boy's name was Alexander Carter, a prodigy who had trained at Juilliard before vanishing from the classical music scene entirely. Her heart raced as she connected the dots. Could it be true? Was Alex the same person as the prodigy from the videos? Determined to find out, she confronted him again one quiet afternoon when the club was empty except for the two of them. "I know who you are," she said softly, sliding a printed photo across the table toward him. It was a black and white image of the young pianist from the video, standing beside a grand piano, his face glowing with pride. Alex stared at the picture for a long time, his jaw tightening slightly. For a moment, it seemed like he might deny it, brushing off her claim as mere coincidence. But then, with a heavy sigh, he nodded. "Yeah, that's me," he admitted quietly. "Or at least it used to be." The journalist leaned forward, her pen poised over her notebook. "What happened?" she asked gently. "Why did you stop performing?" Alex hesitated, his eyes drifting toward the window. Outside, the city bustled with life, oblivious to the weight of the story unfolding inside the quiet club. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost hesitant, as if he hadn't told this story in years. "It wasn't my choice," he began. "When I was younger, everything revolved around music. My parents were musicians too. They taught me everything I know. We lived for it, breathed it. But when I was 22, they died in a car accident. His voice cracked slightly and he paused to steady himself. After that, I couldn't bring myself to play anymore. Music reminded me too much of them, of what we'd lost, so I walked away. I needed to start over, to find a new normal. The journalist listened intently, scribbling notes as discreetly as possible. She could see the pain in his eyes, the weight of memories he'd carried for so many years. "And now?" she prompted gently. "Why come back to it now?" Alex smiled faintly, a bittersweet expression that tugged at her heartstrings. "Because music isn't just mine," he said. "It belongs to everyone. When I sit down at that piano, I don't do it for me. I do it for the people listening. Maybe it helps them heal or remember or feel something they can't put into words. And maybe, just maybe, it helps me heal too." Though she pressed him for more details, Alex refused to elaborate further. He made it clear that he wanted no part of fame or media attention. "This isn't about me," he insisted. "It's about the music. Let it speak for itself." True to his word, Alex continued to perform each night, pouring his soul into every note while staying firmly rooted. In the shadows, the journalist respected his wishes, choosing not to publish her findings. Instead, she wrote a short article praising the mysterious pianist without revealing his identity, leaving readers to speculate about the man behind the music. Despite his efforts to remain anonymous, Alex's impact continued to grow. Strangers began approaching him after shows, sharing pieces of their own lives and thanking him for the emotions his music stirred within them. One woman tearfully recounted how his rendition of Hallelujah had helped her cope with the loss of her husband. Another man confessed that Alex's improvisations gave him the courage to leave a toxic job and pursue his dreams. These stories stayed with Alex, lingering in his mind long after the applause faded. Inspired by these connections, Alex started experimenting with original compositions. Drawing from the experiences people shared with him, he wove fragments of their stories into his melodies, creating pieces that resonated deeply with audiences. His music became a tapestry of human emotion, joy, sorrow, hope, resilience, all bound together by the universal language of sound. Record labels took notice, offering lucrative deals and promising to catapult him to stardom. But Alex declined every offer, insisting that his music remain untainted by commercial interests. Instead, he focused on using his gift to give back. On slow nights, he began inviting local street performers to join him on stage, giving them a platform to showcase their talents. He collaborated with struggling artists, helping them refine their craft and build confidence. Word of his generosity spread quickly, drawing even more people to the club not just to hear him play, but to support the community he was building. The transformation of the club mirrored Alex's own journey. What had once been a struggling venue on the brink of closure blossomed into a vibrant hub of creativity and connection. Patrons came not only for the music but for the sense of belonging it fostered. Regulars greeted each other warmly, forming friendships that extended beyond the walls of the club. Even the staff felt a renewed sense of purpose, inspired by Alex's humility and dedication. Through it all, Alex remained steadfast in his belief that music should serve a higher purpose. He often reminded himself and anyone who would listen that art exists not to elevate individuals but to unite communities. It was a philosophy that guided every decision he made, from refusing interviews to mentoring aspiring musicians. As months turned into years, Alex's presence became woven into the fabric of the club and the lives of those who frequented it. Though he never sought recognition, his influence rippled outward, touching countless hearts in ways he may never fully understand. To the world, he might have been just a waiter, but to those who truly listened, he was so much more. Reminder that beauty and meaning can emerge from the unlikeless places, transforming not only individual lives but entire communities. And yet, despite the profound impact he had, Alex knew that his story was far from over. There were still chapters waiting to be written, melodies yet to be composed, and lives yet to be touched. For now, though, he was content to let the music speak for itself, trusting that its power would continue to resonate long after the final note faded into silence. As time went on, Alex's life took on a rhythm that seemed almost poetic. By day, he continued to serve tables, moving quietly between patrons with the same calm efficiency that had defined him for years. But at night, when the lights dimmed and the crowd settled into their seats, he became someone else entirely, a musician whose hands told stories words never could. The duality of his existence fascinated those around him. To some, it felt like watching two completely different people share the same body. To others, it was proof that everyone carries hidden depths, waiting for the right moment to surface. The little jazz club where it all began wasn't just thriving, it had become a cornerstone of the community. People came not only for the music, but for the sense of belonging it offered. Strangers struck up conversations over shared tables, exchanging stories about how Alex's performances had touched their lives. Regulars greeted each other like old friends, forming bonds that extended far beyond the walls of the venue. Even the staff who had once seen Alex as just another coworker now looked at him with a mix of admiration and awe. He hadn't changed who he was. They simply saw him more clearly now, but Alex himself remained grounded. Fame and recognition held little appeal for him. When record labels sent representatives offering deals worth millions, he turned them down without hesitation. "This isn't about money," he'd say firmly. "It's about connection." Instead of chasing stardom, he poured his energy into something far more meaningful, mentoring young musicians. He started small, inviting local kids to sit in during quiet afternoons and play alongside him. At first, many were nervous, intimidated by the thought of performing in front of even a handful of people, but Alex had a way of putting them at ease. He'd pull up a chair, listen intently as they played, and then offer gentle guidance, not criticism, but encouragement. "You've got something special," he'd tell them. "Don't be afraid to let it out." Word spread quickly among aspiring artists, and soon the club became a safe haven for anyone eager to learn. Alex didn't charge for lessons or demand anything in return. All he asked was that they bring their passion and an open heart. Some students stayed for weeks, others for months, but every single one left transformed. They didn't just improve their skills, they gained confidence, discovering parts of themselves they hadn't known existed. One such student was a teenage boy who showed up one rainy afternoon clutching a battered guitar case. His clothes were worn and his eyes darted nervously around the room as if expecting to be turned away. Alex spotted him lingering near the door and waved him over. "Come on in," he said warmly. "What's your name?" The boy mumbled something barely audible, but Alex didn't press. Instead, he gestured toward the stage. "Why don't you show me what you've got?" For a moment, the boy hesitated, clutching his guitar tightly. Then, slowly, he began to play. It wasn't perfect. His fingers stumbled over chords, and his voice wavered, but there was a raw honesty in his performance that resonated deeply. When he finished, Alex nodded approvingly. "That was good," he said. "Really good. Keep practicing and come back whenever you want." Over the next few months, the boy returned regularly, growing bolder with each visit. Alex worked with him patiently, teaching him not just technique, but how to channel emotion into his music. By the end of the year, the boy was performing confidently, in front of packed crowds, earning applause that rivaled Alex's own. Watching him succeed filled Alex with a quiet pride, not because he'd created a protege, but because he'd helped someone find their voice. Inspired by these experiences, Alex decided to take things a step further. He founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing free music education to underserved children. Funding came from donations, benefit concerts, and proceeds from the original compositions he occasionally released online. Though he refused to profit personally, the revenue allowed him to expand the program, reaching kids in neighborhoods where arts programs had long been cut due to budget constraints. The impact was immediate and profound. Schools that had once struggled to keep their bands afloat suddenly found themselves flooded with instruments and resources. Children who had never held a violin or drumstick before discovered talents they never knew they had. And parents, many of whom had sacrificed so much to give their kids a better life, watched in amazement as their children blossomed under Alex's guidance. Through it all, Alex remained humble, deflecting praise and focusing instead on the work itself. "I'm not doing anything special," he'd say whenever someone thanked him. "These kids have always had the potential, they just needed someone to believe in them." Yet, despite his modesty, Alex couldn't deny the profound effect his efforts were having. Music brought people together in ways nothing else could. It bridged gaps between cultures, generations, and backgrounds, creating connections that transcended language and circumstance. In the club, rich businessmen sat shoulder to shoulder with struggling artists, united by the melodies flowing through the air. Outside its walls, the families gathered for community concerts, cheering as their children performed pieces they'd written themselves. Even Alex's own relationship with music evolved. Performing no longer felt like a solitary act. It became a dialogue, a conversation between him and the audience. After shows, people would approach him, sharing snippets of their lives and thanking him for the emotions his music stirred within them. A widower once told him how a particular song reminded him of his late wife, bringing both tears and comfort. A college student confessed that Alex's improvisations inspired her to pursue a career in writing. These moments stayed with him, shaping the way he approached each performance. Though he still performed regularly, Alex began stepping back from the spotlight, allowing younger musicians to take center stage. On any given night, you might find him sitting in the corner, sipping coffee and watching proudly as his students captivated the crowd. Occasionally, he joined them for a duet or provide accompaniment on the piano, but he always made sure the focus remained on them. "This is their time," he'd say with a smile. "Let them shine." By this point, Alex's story had become the stuff of legend. Locals spoke of him with reverence, recounting tales of the mysterious waiter-turned-pianist who had changed their lives forever. Tourists visited the club hoping to catch a glimpse of him, while journalists wrote glowing articles praising his humility and generosity. Yet none of it mattered to Alex. What truly mattered were the connections he'd forged, the lives he'd touched, the dreams he'd helped nurture. Looking back, Alex often reflected on the journey that had brought him here. There had been times when he doubted himself, when the weight of his grief threatened to consume him entirely. But music had been his lifeline, pulling him back from the brink and giving him a reason to keep going. Now, he realized it wasn't just his lifeline, it was everyone's. Through music, people found solace, strength, and hope. Through music, they found each other. And though Alex may have started as just a waiter, he had become so much more. To those who truly listened, he was a reminder that greatness isn't measured by fame or fortune, but by the impact we have on the world around us. He proved that even the quietest voices can resonate deeply, leaving ripples that stretch far beyond what we can see. As the years passed, Alex's legacy continued to grow. The club remained a beacon of creativity and connection, drawing visitors from all walks of life. His nonprofit organization expanded, reaching communities across the country and inspiring similar initiatives worldwide. And the students he mentored carried his teachings with them, spreading the message that art has the power to heal, unite, and transform. Through it all, Alex stayed true to himself, humble, compassionate, and endlessly curious. He didn't need headlines or accolades to feel fulfilled. For him, the greatest reward was knowing that he'd made a difference, however small, in the lives of others. Because in the end, that's what mattered most. Not the applause, not the recognition, but the simple act of sharing something beautiful with the world and trusting that it would find its way to the hearts that needed it most. Years passed, and the little jazz club that had once been on the verge of closing became a beloved institution in the city. It wasn't just a place for music anymore, it was a sanctuary, a space where people came to feel alive, to connect, and to heal. The worn wooden floors creaked with stories, and the walls seemed to hum with memories of laughter, tears, and applause. At the heart of it all was Alex, the man who had started as just a waiter, but whose presence had transformed everything. By now, Alex had stepped away from performing regularly. He still played occasionally, usually during special events or benefit concerts, But his focus had shifted entirely to mentoring young musicians and running the nonprofit organization he'd founded. To him, teaching felt like the natural next step away to pass on not just his skills, but the lessons life had taught him: resilience, humility, and the power of art to bring people together. Every day, Alex worked tirelessly to ensure that no child would ever have to give up their dreams due to lack of resources. His nonprofit provided instruments, offered free lessons, and organized workshops where kids could learn from professional musicians. Some of these students went on to pursue careers in music. Others simply carried the joy of playing into adulthood. But regardless of where they ended up, every single one of them remembered Alex's kindness and encouragement. They remembered how he made them believe in themselves when they didn't think they were good enough. One summer evening, the club hosted a reunion concert celebrating its 10th anniversary under Alex's influence. Former students, collaborators, and friends gathered from near and far to honor the man who had changed their lives. The room was packed, every table occupied, every seat filled. People stood along the walls, craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the stage. There was an electricity in the air, a sense of anticipation that hadn't been felt since Alex's first impromptu performance years ago. As the event began, speakers took turns sharing heartfelt stories about how Alex had impacted them. A woman who had once been too shy to sing in public recalled how Alex coaxed her out of her shell, reminding her that her voice mattered. A teenager who had grown up attending the club's free workshops thanked Alex for giving him a safe place to escape the chaos of his home life. Even some of the staff members spoke, recounting moments when Alex's quiet wisdom had helped them navigate personal struggles. When it was finally Alex's turn to speak, the room fell silent. He walked slowly to the microphone, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, looking slightly uncomfortable under the spotlight. For a moment, he stood there without saying anything, scanning the sea of faces before him. Then, with a small smile, he began to talk not about himself, but about the power of community. "This isn't my story," he said softly, his voice carrying across the hushed room. "It's ours. None of this would have been possible without all of you, the people who showed up, who listened, who believed in what we were trying to build here. Music doesn't exist in a vacuum. It thrives because of connection, because of shared experiences. And tonight I'm reminded of how lucky I am to be part of something bigger than myself." The crowd erupted into applause, but Alex held up a hand, signaling for quiet. "I used to think music was about perfection," he continued, "about hitting the right notes at the right time, but I was wrong. Music is messy, it's raw, it's imperfect, just like us. And maybe that's why it speaks to us so deeply. It mirrors our humanity. So, if there's one thing I hope you take away from tonight, it's this: don't be afraid to let your imperfections show. Don't be afraid to share your voice, whether it's through music, art, or just being kind to someone who needs it. That's how we change the world, one note, one word, one act of kindness at a time." His words hung in the air, resonating with everyone present. When he finished speaking, the room erupted into cheers again, louder this time. Someone shouted, "Play something." And soon the entire audience joined in, chanting his name until Alex relented. He sat down at the piano, adjusting the bench and cracking his knuckles. For a moment, he closed his eyes, letting the weight of the moment settle over him. Then, with a deep breath, he began to play. The melody was slow and haunting, filled with layers of emotion that seemed to echo the journey he'd been on. As the notes filled the room, the chatter faded, replaced by complete silence. Every person in the audience leaned forward, captivated, as if afraid to miss even a single sound. Halfway through the piece, something unexpected happened. One by one, former students began joining him on stage. A guitarist slid into position beside him, followed by a saxophonist, then a drummer. Soon, the entire ensemble was playing together, weaving their individual parts into a harmonious whole. It was chaotic yet beautiful, a testament to the diversity and unity of the community Alex had built. When the final chord rang out, the applause was deafening. People stood clapping, whistling, and cheering, many wiping away tears. Alex looked around at the faces of those he'd mentored, those he'd inspired, and felt a swell of gratitude so profound it nearly brought him to tears. This, he realized, was his legacy, not fame or accolades, but the ripple effect of love and creativity spreading outward, touching lives in ways he might never fully understand. In the weeks that followed, Alex decided it was time to step back. Even further. Though he loved the club and the nonprofit, he knew it was important to let others take the reins. He handed over leadership of the organization to a trusted team of former students, confident that they would carry the mission forward. As for the club, he stayed involved only as an advisor, offering guidance when needed but otherwise letting the new generation lead. For the first time in years, Alex allowed himself to slow down. He rented a small apartment overlooking the city, filling it with books, plants, and of course a piano. During the day, he wrote music pieces inspired by the people he'd met and the stories they'd shared. At night, he wandered the streets, rediscovering the city he'd called home for so long. Sometimes he'd stop by the club unannounced, slipping in quietly to listen to the performances. No one paid much attention to him anymore. He was just another face in the crowd, exactly how he liked it. Occasionally, strangers would recognize him, approaching timidly to thank him for the difference he'd made in their lives. Alex always responded with the same gentle smile and nod, grateful for the reminder of why he'd done what he did. Fame had never interested him, but knowing that his work had touched someone, that was worth more than any award. Looking back on his life, Alex often thought about the night he'd first sat down at the piano in that tiny jazz club. Back then, he hadn't known what would happen. He hadn't planned to change anything. He'd simply wanted to fill a gap left by a missing performer. Yet that single decision had set off a chain reaction that transformed not only his life, but countless others. What struck him most was how unpredictable life could be. He had spent years hiding in plain sight, convinced that his best days were behind him. But music and the people who embraced it had proven him wrong. It had shown him that greatness isn't about standing out. It's about lifting others up. That success isn't measured by wealth or recognition, but by the positive impact you leave behind. Alex's story became a beacon of hope for anyone who doubted their own potential. It served as a reminder that everyone has something valuable to offer, even if it takes time for the world to notice. You don't have to be extraordinary to make a difference, you just have to be willing to try. Whether it's through music, art, kindness, or simply being present for someone in need, every action matters. Every note counts. And though Alex may have stepped out of the spotlight, his influence endured. The club continued to thrive, nurturing new talent and fostering connections among its patrons. His nonprofit grew, reaching communities far beyond the city limits. And the students he'd mentored carried his teachings with them, spreading the message that creativity is a gift meant to be shared. In the end, Alex's legacy wasn't about him. It was about the countless lives he'd touched and the ripple effects of his actions. He proved that greatness isn't reserved for the famous or the wealthy. It belongs to anyone who chooses to use their gifts for good. Through music, through mentorship, and through simple acts of compassion, Alex showed the world that even the quietest voices can resonate deeply, leaving echoes that last long after the final note fades. So while the city moved on, buzzing with its usual energy, the little jazz club remained a constant, a place where magic happened nightly, thanks to the man who had once been just a waiter. And though Alex preferred to stay in the background, his story lived on, whispered between strangers, celebrated in melodies, and etched into the hearts of those fortunate enough to have crossed his path.